Alrighty, Old Roller Nation, welcome back to the show for his second interview. Mark Cukro, Pedro Sauer black belt, and just awesome guy, personal hero. Mark, welcome to the show. So glad to have you again.
Yeah, I'm glad to be back. Thanks for having me.
So to kind of give you a little bit of background about what I wanted to talk with you about. This time period is a strange one. We are in the throes of a pandemic, and I think we're finding that in certain areas, it's kind of business as usual. And in other areas, like mine, things are closed down and we can't open. And we're seeing what I would consider like a bit of a proliferation in garage gyms and like not actual schools, but just what Stephen Kesting has termed training pods, like small groups of people getting together who, maybe by way of their occupation or whatever, they're fairly isolated. So they feel like the risk of, bringing COVID to their training group is pretty low. So they just kind of, almost, to use a odd word, nest together, but are working together to still be improving their jiu-jitsu, but maybe don't have the access to an instructor or a class that they would previously. And so I think if we want to really think about maximizing our time in these oddball circumstances, the use of curriculum is really important. And someone may be in the position of having to create a curriculum or evaluate someone else's curriculum and say, what makes one, more useful given our training scenario versus another. And so I'm kind of putting together some episodes to help people evaluate or create their own curriculum, as it were, if they want or need to. And later on, at some point, I will be an instructor. I haven't reached, a level of experience and seasoning yet that I think I need to be running classes. But at some point, that'll happen. And so on a selfish level, I'm also investigating this now to have a deeper understanding of it when the time comes that I need to put it to use. So knowing that you are involved in curriculum design, I wanted to talk to you about it because I think getting an informed and, shall we say, expert, I know you're a humble guy, but we'll use the term expert, opinion on what makes a curriculum valid, what makes it useful, what makes it effective, and what makes it maximize our results when we put it to use will help us in our curriculum design efforts.
Okay, yeah, that's a deep question. We could talk about this for a long time,
and that's why you're here.
Yeah, it's and I appreciate it. I think the first thing is, say you train and you're like, okay, I'm a blue belt, purple belt, I'm getting interested in teaching. I don't have a curriculum. My instructor just kind of gave us belts. I don't know if I agree or disagree or feel one way, but how do I know what I'm supposed to teach? Mm-hmm. If you have an established academy and say you're a black belt and you have 25, 50 students and you want to increase your student base, but you want to maintain the integrity of the art, what do you do, right? And so I think on the last episode, I made a comment, and it's just something I came up with, and I strongly believe, though, is if you take a group of blue belts, say 10 blue belts from the same academy, and you have them kind of all stand in a circle, and you ask the question, what did you have to do to get your blue belt? And if they all look at each other and they're like, then that's an opportunity to improve. And so the number one thing I think you have to figure out is, number one, are you interested in doing one? And are you mentally flexible enough to change the way you approach teaching? And then are you also willing at the same time to change maybe your class structure or your schedule? And if the answer is yes to those, you're good to go. If the answer is no, don't waste your time. Continue to do what you're doing. Mm-hmm. You can absolutely have a structured program that maintains a high level of integrity in the art and skill without selling out. You just have to know how to do it. And I think the most common mistake people make is they go, okay, I've been training for 5, 10, 15 years. this is what I think it should be. And they don't really have a background in developing a curriculum that makes sense in a logical, orderly fashion.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first thing is you got to have to kind of know what you are. Are you self-defense primarily, sport secondary, sport first? Are you a mixture of both? And when you understand that, now you can start to develop the curriculum. So you can kind of lay everything out and then say, okay, now am I teaching kids at what age? 4 to 6, 4 to 7, whatever your age groups are. But children do need to be broken up into age groups. You can't have too wide of a spectrum of ages, and you cannot teach children like adults, and you cannot teach adults like children. So once we understand that, it's a lot easier. Then next thing I would recommend is ask yourself, okay, what skills do I want transferable from me to everybody on my team? So in other words, if you have a superstar that has a really unique signature to their game, they probably can't make many students like them
Mm-hmm.
because their attributes are specialized, or their niches or their tendencies are. But if you say, okay, let's look at it this way, I have to have movement before technique. So what movements do I need in all of my warm-ups that are going to be part of my techniques in the classroom, so that you don't do, like, say, jumping jacks? Why would you do jumping jacks? I mean, if it benefits something, do it. But if you're like, I don't know, it's just a warm-up we do, then I would consider eliminating that and putting a technique that's dissected into a movement that's a warm-up. So now you have a higher repetition of the movements that you're going to use. And then you go through gross motor movement, fine motor movement, and then refined skill motor movement. And kids usually, they just want to have fun, and they want to come
Mm-hmm.
in, and you got to get them into the like rough motor skills and just basic core movements. And then 1 or 2 techniques tops. Don't have them sit down for more than 1 or 2 minutes. And the basic way to tell if you lost the kids in class is when they start leaning and looking around. You're just
That's
like,
what I do.
yeah,
I'm
it's,
an adult.
no, it just like start looking around. They pick at the mat, and you're like, stop, you've already lost them. So it's interesting because you have to be like really engaged and then fun and chill at the same time. And then you move, like, say, from 4 to 6, which is really more of like an assimilation phase of the children into jiu-jitsu. Yeah, you'll have some superstars, but they're the smaller group. But can they learn how to shrimp, bridge, upa, put the hands in the collar, grab the sleeves correctly, do a throw, whatever? Doesn't matter what it is. Osotogari could be a double leg, single leg, whatever.
It's all
But
double legs. It's all double legs.
man, kids, I love double leg takedowns. And the kid, and the kids, they're just so much, they don't care. That's the thing, is they don't care if they look bad. They just go.
Yeah.
And so it's good to encourage that. And, but it's got to be technical enough to develop skill, but have enough novelty to keep it fun at the end. And then as the kids get older, you get a little more serious and intense, right? So the 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds, they love a tough class. They want to roll. They want to get at it. And so it does take some time. So I would start with that. So what do I want? What movements can I use as warm-ups? And then how do I keep the same thing fresh, new, and exciting over a long period of time? And then when do the kids move up? So I would start with those questions. And then you can look at all of your curriculum and you say, okay, write down all the positions, and not what you prefer, but what most people can learn. Like, I think everybody can learn how to recover guard. You have to learn the difference.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves now.
Okay, so
so far I've proven that may not be true.
it can be tough, man. I don't care what level of black belt. Yeah, it's tough for everybody. But so you have to figure out, like, what can everybody pick up on, and you have to really understand the difference between a correct technique that's fundamentally sound, a preference, and an incorrect technique. And so that's why a lot of associations and people that have standardized curriculums, they fight over variations and small differences. And really just ask yourself, okay, does he or she really understand what they're doing? Who showed you that? My instructor did. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, keep going. And that's it. So you can have some variation. You can't be dogmatic about it. So you have to ask, is the fundamental uh, important critical factors, like the keys to success, are they in the move? Okay, good.
Yeah.
And then you move on. The white to blue is the most important curriculum there is, because that establishes all of your movements. And if there's one set of habits you don't really want to spend a lot of time unwinding and correcting, is white to blue, because the formation of the primary habits is the most important.
Yeah.
And then after that, you can learn something, see it once, and do it forever. But the first 2 years is really important to how people are taught to understand the techniques and how they're broken down.
That makes sense to me. From aviation, in I was lucky in that I was part of. We didn't necessarily design curricula, but we would continuously evaluate the curriculum that we were using in every training course to see that we were being effective. And the law of primacy is what we called what you were saying is like the first contact with an idea or a technique is the one that is going to be the most ingrained and the most difficult to, as you said, unwind.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of have to get that right. That was a problem for me as a primary instructor when I taught the private pilots. I had a tough time because I was very natural to the private pilot course. Like, it didn't take me a lot of effort. And so sometimes my instruction would be, this is how you do it. And that didn't necessarily work. That's almost like operating out of attributes. Like, I couldn't explain why what I was doing was working. It just did. And in later courses, the like instrument and navigation courses where you're learning to fly along defined courses inside of clouds with no reference to the ground, I was a really good instructor there because I sucked so hard at learning that I had to build really detailed systems to make it work. And then I was able to just take those packaged systems and just hand them off. And so that was really good primacy. Whereas previously, like I said, the primacy for what we call visual pilots or private pilots, I wasn't great at teaching. It took me a long time to figure that out, and a lot of like really frustrating some of my students.
Yeah, the thing is, like, if you look at all the great instructors, they make it look easy, right? And of course, there's nothing easy in jiu-jitsu. And I can't even imagine what it's like for a pilot. How many hours? And it's like how many hours you put in, and then how much you actually look forward to the little mistakes that don't cost too much, right? That you can recover from and learn. And the basic idea is, once you create something, you standardize it, right? And then you improve it, and then you analyze it again, and that cycle never stops.
Right.
And like, I'll just say, for us example, 50% of our black belt exam is on the white to blue. It's just not at the same level of proficiency. Most of the self-defense, in fact, I would say all of it, you can do on the ground, but you can't do all the groundwork standing up because the plane is different. But if you do one, it will help
just
with the other.
For listeners who maybe aren't familiar with that, this is the curriculum within the Pedro Sauer Association. I apologize for not
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's specific to our association. But it doesn't have to be to everybody else, but as long as you understand like what you're doing in the beginning. Now the phases of instruction, and this is my opinion, is white to blue is nothing but survival, static movement. Can you show me the concepts of the technique? Can you do it? Can you do it while you move a little? Perfect. After that, 1 to 2, 3 years, whatever it takes to get a blue belt, the next phase is going to be, this is where like technique acquisition begins, where people want to learn everything. And then you really have to focus on your transitions, your combinations, and your grips. And you'll see a lot of people that grip in jiu-jitsu and their hands are mangled. And it's because sometimes, of course, it happens. But if you learn how to grip properly in the beginning, you can avoid a lot of that, just like anything else. And so you'll move from that static movement to like more fluid movement. And then in your brown belt is where you really start, you kind of come up with your own style and your own approach to jiu-jitsu, and you know exactly what you're good at, and you know exactly what you're not good at and what you want to improve on. And you'll typically have no problems at all spending 6 months to improve one position with enthusiasm, and you're eager to do it. And you celebrate the small detail, whereas the first 2 belts, not so much. Just show me what to do and I got it. And that's not the case for everybody, but it is for a lot. And then a black belt, I promise, when you get one, you'll feel like you're starting over. That's for sure. And it sounds a little strange to say. And most people I know, including me, I looked at my belt for 3 months and I couldn't believe it was real. And then you just settle into it. And that goes, back to you have the range of belts within every belt. I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
you've ever heard that. It's a similar thing. So with the curriculum, know what you want, movement before technique. And then what skills are transferable to everybody in the curriculum. So if you have attribute-based training, it shouldn't be in the fundamental class. It should be in the advanced classes. And of course, build your attributes, get strong, get fast, eat well, all of those things. And then you'll create whatever you have, you'll standardize it. Once it's standardized, after a year or 2, you can evaluate it and then re-improve it and have this continuous improvement cycle. It's also important to note, if anyone's writing anything down, taking notes, that you have to address in your curriculum all 3 learning styles. So it has to be kinesthetic, which means I have to feel it, auditory, which means I have to hear it, and then visual means I need to see it. And as an instructor, if you teach someone and you typically learn primarily through visual, you might get frustrated at someone that has to teach what they just learned to someone else. And you'll see instructors get upset sometimes and like, I just showed this to you. Why are you teaching it? And because it's their learning style, and that's how they reinforce their learning. A really good instructor that is knowledgeable and experienced will know that and go, okay, show me what you just did with him or her. Okay, add this one detail, show me that,
Mm-hmm.
and then walk away. Or someone may say, can you show me a technique? I need to see it. Can I see it one more time? Can I see it from this angle? And the answer is yes, right? And then, of course, some of the people, and my instructor's like this, if I ask him a question, he goes, okay, do it to me. He'll do it once and he comes up with 1,000 answers. But if you explain it, not so much. And so we have to know that when we teach, that we have to have room for that built into the class time. So it's not just the curriculum, it's how much time you allow in the class for all of those styles to be communicated, which is why most really good instructors will move around the room. And they'll ask someone what questions they have instead of see if they do have one. If you say, who's got a question, nervous people won't ask. But if you say, who's got the first question about anything that we just did or something close, a couple seconds of awkward silence, someone will ask a question. And so those are helpful. And
I like what you said there about this kind of goes back to where you said kids it doesn't hurt their feelings if they look bad. And with adults, when you open things up for questions, you're going to have this period where you can say, who's got a question? And nobody will raise their hand because they're afraid of looking like a dope. I'm kind of an outlier on that. I actually am totally okay with, like not looking that smart. Because I've been married long enough to know that I'm not that smart. But so I find myself being the person who will ask the question if I didn't understand it. I just generally assume if I didn't get it, then probably there's somebody else that didn't get it. So I'm helping us, not just me. That's sort of arrogant, but really what it is that I'm totally okay with looking like the idiot, to ask the question. But I also accept that not everyone is. And so I like your idea of going around the room as people are broken up into smaller groups. If you say, hey, we're over here and what about this is, you know, where's your sticking point or whatever. There's only one other person, maybe their uke, who can observe them looking like an idiot, you know. So that even reduces that question anxiety, just by changing the situation. So if everyone's sitting in a circle and we say, what's your questions? Well, that's a lot more eyes on me versus just me and my uke, who already knows I'm getting stuck.
Yeah, and some people don't mind. Like, who's got a question? They'll raise their hand, and every question is a favor for the group, right? Whatever question you ask favors the company you're in. So it's always helpful to do that. And some people, they don't want to look bad. They don't want to feel like they look bad. They don't look bad, but they feel like they do. And so you could do
And
both.
yeah, and that's totally fine. I actually, you know, I totally understand why someone wouldn't want to feel that way. It becomes incumbent on the instructor to create both a culture, but also set the tone and the environment so that that goes away, and you know, we're increasing learning opportunities versus, you know, like emotional engagements.
Yeah, and part of that is, and goes back to the point of curriculum development. You have to know what techniques take more time. Like I'll just use our curriculum. Out of our curriculum, there's 5 things that pretty much everybody gets stuck on. Well, we should know that. So we should allow more time for that. We should break it down a little bit more. We should connect it to something else maybe, or have some overlap when that's taught. So it's taught for a longer period of time because the movements are more complex. But, you know, that's the thing when you get used to curriculum design, or you've been training, you could look at things and go, okay, for example, if you do a stack pass, the basic, most common stack pass number 1, pretty much half the class is going to go, want to get triangled, right? And you're like, no. And they're like, yes, I will. And you're like, okay, because you feel like you will doesn't mean you will if it's done right. But they feel like it because they don't pull their elbow in and block the femur, or they don't put their hips in and put pressure down. So, but we have to identify those areas that need more time. And you'll go through this competency cycle, right? So you have unconscious incompetence, where you have no idea. You know this, right? You have no idea what you don't know. In fact, it's kind of funny at some point. And then you realize, and you move into the conscious competence where you're like, well, I can't believe I thought I knew that. Or you start to really understand how much you don't know. And then through your movements, and this is where the warm-ups and the drills come in, is you move into the unconscious competence where you start doing things right, connecting them, kind of like at a purple belt phase, where you just start connecting the dots on autopilot, but you don't really know why. And then you move into the brown to the black belt part of the journey. And now you're like, okay, I completely understand why I know what I know and why I don't know certain things. And then you fill them in. Because there's really no such thing as like being totally unconscious and oblivious after training for a long time. You kind of know where your shortcomings are. And if you don't, well, we got to work on that. But, you know, the people that develop curriculum, like in the students, and I think it was maybe Henry Huron said this, but, and it's a common thing in teaching, is your students don't care what you can do to them. They want to know what you can do for them, and how you can help them. And, you know, that's the basic idea of all of this. And now, if you're, say, for example, a self-defense school, and you say, okay, well, you know, if everybody quits in a year, I want them to know how to defend punches, know a few takedowns, and get out of the mount. That should be a primary component of your curriculum. If you're a sports school and you're like, man, I don't care about that at all, I want to do jiu-jitsu just for competition, wonderful. Eliminate all the self-defense and put the core movements that build your game into that development. And so the challenge with knowing what you want right away is most people fear making the wrong choice from the very beginning. So they just start teaching class and they don't really have a clear, concise understanding of what they are and what they're not, what they want to be and what they don't want to be. And I think that unnecessarily prevents a lot of people from developing solid programs.
That reminds me of something that's sort of been a thread through many of the interviews of this podcast that came to me from Josh Waitzkin's book, The Art of Learning, which is start with the end in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're basically saying is if you can't decide on a particular set of goals, it's going to be very hard to create a curriculum that accomplishes those goals. So if you haven't decided, am I going to be primarily self-defense? Am I going to be primarily sport? Is there going to be some amalgam of the two? Where are we going to fall in that perspective?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be very difficult then to evaluate your curriculum's outcomes because you don't have a goal that you're measuring them against.
Right. And that's the thing. It's like, okay, so let's do this. I want to take 10 blue belts from this academy, 10 blue belts from that academy in the same association. I want everyone, I'm going to call them out. I want you to go through your blue belt curriculum. You should have basically the same result within whatever the accepted variance is. If you have one group that nails it and the other one that's like, I don't even know what you're talking about, well, then your program's failed, right? So you need to understand that. And a good question to ask too is, do you want really good blue belts or do you want really good black belts? And which one do you put more value on? And the reason I say that is because it's easy to go, I want them to be good at every belt. And that's why a lot of sandbagging takes place in some places. Is, you know, if you want a better long-term result, you need a better investment throughout the entire process. And, you know, so for example, if you've been teaching for say 40 years and you've only given out 2 black belts, you're not a very good instructor. I don't even know what to say. And that's not just, you could blame it on people quitting if you want, but people don't leave good academies and good cultures unless there's an event in their life that pulls them away from it or they lose interest. But if you have 1,000 students in group A and 1,000 students in group B, this one has clear, concise, measurable results and expectations, you're going to see a marked difference between the person that randomly teaches whatever's on their mind. And you can kind of see a product at the end, basically, right? So if you want good competitors, you got to put competitive programs in there. But to go back to what you said is if you're like, man, I don't know, what do you want a black belt to look like? What do you want a brown belt to be good at? And if someone were to evaluate them 10 years from now, which did they know? And then you could break it into 4 sections by belt, and then you can fill it in from the beginning. Mm-hmm. So it's simple and complex at the same time. It's simple and not easy. And I think the reason most people don't do it is 1, they don't know how, and 2, when they realize how much work's involved in it, they just don't do it. But you have to boil down all the moves and say to yourself, okay, what is the root base movement and the most important points of this move or technique, and why are we teaching it? And like, for example, there's 3 shrimps. There's only 3, forwards and backwards. As long as you know those, you're good to go. But why do you use each one? Do you want a blue belt to just know that there's 3, and then the purple belt to know that there's 3 of each one, like forwards and backwards? Because you have shrimps where you move reverse, shrimps where you stay stationary, and then shrimps where you move forward. And then you have 3 on each side. So which ones do you want them to learn where? Some of them they'll naturally learn if they learn the 3 basic ones. But those are the things we've got to fill in to be specific to our own academy.
Mm-hmm. I in listening to you talk about that, there's a lot of, just like you said, it's simple but very complex, and simple but not easy. And if there was maybe a definition of jiu-jitsu, you could put that, you know, it's a simple idea with complex execution. Mm-hmm. And then the breaking things down into simple movements and stuff doesn't mean that they're going to be easy to accomplish. You still have to put a lot of work in. Mm-hmm. And so curriculum design, you could almost see it as, leading back to the entire journey of what makes a jiu-jitsu person. It's like what makes mm-hmm. a curriculum designer you're dealing with the same problems. How do you break down complexity into, simple basic parts so that it's digestible? And then how do you convince people that while we've now simplified it and made it digestible, it's still never going to be easy? There's going to be a lot of challenges along the way.
Yeah, and Master Sauer has a saying. He says every hot bowl of soup is eaten by one spoon at a time from the edge, right? And so you got to make it digestible. It's never going to be. It'll be easier for others, but that's the beauty of jiu-jitsu is it's one of the few arts that I personally have done that I could do for another 50 years and never learn half of it. But it's noticeable to me, especially. I'm very fortunate. I get to travel all over the country. I go to different countries sometimes too. And I could walk in within 5 minutes of watching a class, know what the academy culture is like, what the
Hmm.
tone of the environment is, and whether or not those people are organized within minutes. And it's also interesting. It's kind of disappointing when I go somewhere and people don't even really know what they're teaching until they show up,
Right.
Um, now, at the same time, you can't be dogmatic with your instruction and your curriculum, because if you're too much, then it takes away the fun, right? It takes away the novelty. So you want to, this is from an instructor perspective, but you got to get to the point. You can't be up there talking for 5 minutes at a time and then going back and forth. I'll give you an example. My kids have two of them are taking class online now because of the pandemic. They don't like it. So they get an instructor on and he starts talking about how he used to work for this company, and he tells them his history, and he goes, well, wait a minute, no, actually that's not right, so let me back up and go. And he starts going, let me back up over here, let me correct this, and it was like, oh my goodness, you got to get to the point. And there's as much skill put into communicating and articulating your point that there is to executing and understanding the technique. And I think that's one of the most important, because if I had to choose, who would I want to teach class? A really good competitor or a really good teacher? I would almost always, 99% of the time, pick a good teacher, because they can
Hmm.
make 1,000 good competitors. But to me, it's a smaller group to have a really good competitor that's an amazing teacher. We need both. But who do you want sharing information in the classroom? Both. But if you could only pick one, which one would you pick? And I think we have to kind of figure that out too, because I see a lot of people, they promote themselves based on their credentials or accomplishments, and they can't teach at all. And they have no business teaching. And then I see lower ranks that sometimes teach much better than higher ranks. I've seen blue belts teach better than black belts. I've seen purple belts teach better. I've seen black belts that are amazing. And then some they shouldn't be teaching. So in the curriculum, instructor development, in my opinion, should be part of it. That's just purely my opinion. But to get back to everything and just kind of bring it back around to a summary, you have to have logical, linear blocks that progress from one to the other, that anybody that even knows a little bit could look at and go, okay, that makes sense. And if not, it should be very easy to explain. And then we'll go through the creation, the standardization, the improvement, and the competency cycle as we do all of that. And before you start anything, you have to know exactly what you want to do and don't want to do, and what's it for. Self-defense, sport, kind of both, MMA, you name it. And I would start with those.
Well, I think that's a very logical sort of, block design. Can we maybe take a scenario of somebody who's I'll use myself as an example, even
Sure.
though I'm not doing this. So I'm a purple belt. Let's say I have two or maybe three training partners that are going to train with me. One's a blue belt and two are white belts,
Mm.
and um, we go to a primarily self-defense school. And how would I look at ways of reinforcing for myself and this group what we're trying to accomplish, which is to be competent in a self-defense style jiu-jitsu? in general, garage gyms, we would say takedowns are going to have to be limited because you don't have the best mats. So we have to maybe practice takedown entries, and like there's not going to be a lot of randori, like judo randori, or
Right, right.
blast doubles and whatnot. But what would you use as your evaluation tools to then put together a curriculum that, say, we're going to be at this for 6 months to a year. Hopefully that's the low end, right? Like
Hmm.
I don't want this to be, like a 3-year
Sure.
process for all of us. Hopefully that's not going to happen. But what if you were in someone like my shoes? What would be the things that you were looking at to build then your curriculum and say, this is how we're going to put this together so that we can get the most out of this time?
Okay, so that actually moves away from curriculum development into classroom management,
Okay.
right? So the curriculum would be the same. So for example, if you can't have the room that you need to do throws, it's time to drill in a small space. Drill, 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 drill. And then we move into, this is just a phrase I use, and I call it cooperative resistance. So now you and I are trained, Harrison, and I'm going to pick up the resistance 10%, an actual 10, not 90 and call it 10, actually 10. And then I'm going to do 20, 30, 40. I'm going to give you most of what you want, half of what you want, nothing of what you want. And the minute we get out of our perimeter or proximity or a space, then we have to reset and start over. So you can make up for that in drills, repetition, and isolation. And so you can do that anywhere. Like if I teach a seminar and I go to a huge academy and there's 100 people, I'm going to look around. This is how we're teaching the class. If I go to a small place and there's 15 people, okay, this is how we're going to teach the class. And that comes with experience, but that is, you can do the same techniques on the curriculum. You teach them in a different management style.
Mm-hmm.
So in the small garage, what I would really do, and a lot of the people that I look up to, this is their philosophy, and it's mine as well, is the isolation drills and the isolated sparring is more important than full outright free roll sparring in the development of skill, right? So
Mm-hmm.
because you don't really develop skill when you roll, you develop timing. And so the skill and the sensitivity is developed more so in the breakdowns, the drilling, the techniques, the repetition, the isolated rolling with low levels of energy, and then you bring up the energy, and you can execute under what we call functional duress or functional training, like with someone absolutely resisting faster than if you just teach them two techniques and roll. And I can tell you this from years of experience. And if someone disagrees, you're welcome to disagree. We can have lunch someday.
We could fight them.
We can, it's, but if I took a group of people, say my own students, and just so I don't want to mention anyone other than me, but I say, okay, you guys can only roll for the next 3 months, nothing else. And then I take another group and I say, you guys can drill half the time and roll half the time. I fully expect the people to drill and roll to be better than the people that just rolled, because they're not getting new input and breakdowns of techniques. They just show up and roll. Now, at the same time, as you progress, you're going to go through that technique acquisition phase, like a blue to purple, and then you're going to start eliminating everything all over again. And then you're going to get down to your 5, 10, 15 top things that you do. And then you'll go through these phases. Like, I don't know why, but last year I was all about sweeps. This year I'm more about half guard or butterfly, whatever it is. And that's just to keep the cycle of development and novelty in your game. Most people that are good at jiu-jitsu are obsessive a little bit
Mm-hmm.
in the way that they want to approach something. Like I took a couple of guys, all like 250 and above. And I said, okay, hold me down in a mount. I'm 160 pounds if I'm lucky. Do not let me out no matter what. I didn't move for like a month. And then I got out once or twice. And then I got out 2, 3, 4 times. Then I got out 5, 6, 7, 8 times. And then I was like, okay, now really don't let me up. And then I went back down to 2 or 3 times. And so now it's a lot harder. Most people that want to be good at jiu-jitsu because it's part of their life and who they are, they don't mind spending a year on something, because the belt is not the pursuit. The lifestyle is the benefit, right?
So that kind of leads me to a question once again, and I'm using, sort of a COVID garage training scenario. Would it then be important to evaluate yourself and the small group that you're with for what are their biggest needs, like the lowest hanging fruit, and say, let's spend a lot of time, like, we don't have access to a whole class, we don't have
Mhm.
access maybe to a black belt that can teach us. Let's maximize the time to the things that we can learn the most with the least amount of tools. So, like, let's say, one of us, maybe me, has a real hard time with guard
Yeah.
retention. Then it might be, uh, in terms of like my 3 to 6 month curriculum, or 6 month to a year curriculum, it might be a guard retention study phase, and I'll just
Mhm.
practice a lot of that and just have people pass my guards, and I will basically have to handicap, like, say, hold tennis balls, or do the
Mhm.
no hands guard, or
Yep.
different means and different methods, switching to wrestling up versus, staying, in a guard position, just having multiple options.
Yeah.
So that might be maybe not a curriculum per se, but that would be a needs assessment, followed by, just like a long execution, sort of an obsessive execution period, and practice, one element, and say, I'm going to be much better on the backside of this, uh, given that I have limited tools. I don't have necessarily black belts to work with, but I can get good work from athletic, white and blue belts,
Mhm.
with, especially with guard retention. I know that I can get that.
Oh, you can get, I mean, from guard retention, anybody will give you, a good workout. But uh, so you can do, so a couple things. You can't always address the lowest hanging fruit either. You have to address both, right? But what you can do is, okay, at the end of every class, everybody gets one or two rolls, whatever you do. My role now is to get everyone in my guard before you leave. 1 minute, 30 seconds, go. Handicap yourself, one hand, two hands, hand in the belt, whatever, hand behind your back, whatever that is. And so you can address it like that. And that doesn't really come down to curriculum so much as classroom management. So when you're in the garage, you can, and it's only 5 or 6 or 10 of you, you kind of know exactly what everybody needs. Now, when you're in a small setting, it's easier to notice the flaws in somebody's game too. And so you can address those. But this is what I like about rotating curriculums. Like, for example, I'll just say us. We do a month a time for every position. Now, if you think you understand how to hold the guard and you have to teach a guard retention class for a month and keep it amazing, interesting, engaging, and actually educational, you're going to learn a lot about that position. And you're going to really start to break down, like, do I hold more with my feet? Do I squeeze with my toes out or my toes up? Do I pull in or do I push? Do I grab with my hands or my elbows when they're over the head? And now I could teach a guard retention for a month easy. In the beginning, I couldn't because I didn't know enough about it, although I felt comfortable with my skill set at my belt level.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start to isolate those things, you're really going to understand a lot of the little gaps and you'll start to see them. Like, I think we use the analogy, if you have like short cycles, like say you do a position of a week, you can do that. But let's just say most people come to 2 classes a week, say 3. How are you going to teach an entire half guard or a guard in 3 classes
Right.
before you switch, right? So I think it's good to do for a few weeks. And during those weeks, the first week is primary fundamental movements, an overview. The second week now is you're starting to combine things. The third week is everything starts with a combination. The fourth week is a review. And then every 3 months, you have 5 weeks. Now you could do whatever novelty you want on that. And so now each week has its own purpose. And if you do have a fifth week, it's a review. If you have a fourth, you make that fourth week the review, but it will be shorter. So that's a good way to do it.
I think that's a great breakdown, and builds and reinforces on the known, as we, move to the unknown, and then reviews to make sure that we didn't forget the stuff that we learned week one.
Yeah, I mean, I could tell you, you know, it sounds funny, and I'm a stickler for curriculum. Is if I take all my blue belts and I haven't done a blue belt test in a year, I say, okay, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to review the entire blue belt test today. I'm going to call it out one by one, write down the list of 88 techniques. Some of them will look at each other and go, oh no, I'm not sure I remember all of it, right? So, but that's the idea. It's in their movement now. So of course they have to review it. So an occasional review of everything they know previously, it's called the mastery style approach to teaching, is I think a very important thing to do, because you will forget how much you don't know and realize how much you remember in the very same setting.
So when you say mastery style of teaching, what are you referencing there? That might be some educational work that I need to review myself.
So there's like, I can send you some information on it, but basically what it means is, like, I'll give you an example. Say you go from white to blue. Here's your 88 techniques. For us, that's what it is. For, I don't know what it is for anybody else. So then you, okay, before you test for your purple belt, I want you to review all of this, because most of what's in the purple belt is connected to what's in the blue belt.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? So
Yes.
now your reference is refined higher than it was if you just learned purple belt material. And that's it. And so, like, for example, the self-defense demonstration or exam that we do, white to blue is the first 25%, blue to purple is 50%. So in blue to purple, you would do white to blue and then blue to purple.
Mm-hmm.
And so on and so forth. So by the time you are testing for your black belt, you're on autopilot. You're killing it. You can't say I haven't seen it in 10 years.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I like that. And jujitsu is very self-reinforcing. Like, the things that most people, use Hodger Gracie as an example, the cross choke from mount. I mean,
Right.
that is white belt class material, and it definitely has proven itself to work at the highest levels. So I like those thoughts. Now let's transition the other way. So we've talked about
Sure.
like someone maybe in my position. Let's look at a scenario of a new black belt or maybe a new school owner, and let's say that they're in an association that does things more of in a free form way. They don't have a set curriculum. It's like we feel when you're a blue belt, we feel when you're a purple belt, we feel when you're a brown belt. And I'm not trying to say that those things are invalid. The system, there's a lot of systems that work that way, and clearly some very good practitioners that have come from it.
Sure.
So it's perfectly okay. I'm asking this almost as an intellectual exercise. I don't have a dog in the fight of like, is it necessary, is it not? I don't care. I want to know about it. So let's say you're that new school owner and you're put in a position where you don't have a ready-made curriculum, like if you were within the Pedro Sauer Association.
Mm-hmm.
What would then be your steps? Would you look at people that you came up with and try to build a consensus about what the things that a curriculum requires, or is there a way that you could build it on your own and be able to uh, be assured of its validity out of the gate, even though you're going to reassess and continue to improve it?
Yeah, that's another deep question. So what most people do is they ask their friends, oh, hey, you have curriculum, can you send it to me? And then they look at it and they compile everything and they look for commonalities and consistencies across the board. And that's, people do that in business too all the time.
Yeah.
So, knock yourself out. If you have an association that has a curriculum, I mean, I can look at it and tell whether someone just put something on a sheet of paper or if they put thought into it after a while. Like anything, after a while, like you could probably look at a new pilot and go, I could tell you've been training for a long time or flying for a long time. Some of the old school guys could look at someone and go, man, that guy's a blue belt or a purple belt. I have one of my uncles, he restores old muscle cars. You could pull a car in his garage, he'd listen to it, and he would tell you if the timing was on or off, whether it was burning the right way. You know what I mean? Like just by the sound.
Yeah.
But that's a non-transferable skill in the beginning of someone's career. So in the beginning, you don't have to have curriculum all the way up, but I think you absolutely have to have it from white to blue. And so that goes back to the other questions. If you're new and your association has something, your challenge will be, how do I teach this in a fun way all the time and make it fun for me as a teacher too? You can easily develop something on your own by trial and error, and you could take a long time doing that. Like, for example, if you're going to teach someone how to defend a stick or a knife, well, you could just swing it at them and see what they do. They're going to get cut or hit, right? Or they could go to an instructor and in 3 months learn more than they did in 2 years of just having someone swing at them. So it depends on, who you want to seek, if you want to pay for it or not, but I can say this: if you are organized, and you don't have to be organized at every belt, but at least the first one or two, you're going to have a program that's easier to grow and multiply. Because the one thing, especially in American culture, is we want to know exactly what's expected of us, what the timeline estimation of our achievements are, what we need to do, what we don't need to do, and who do we talk to when we think it's time. And that is a very ingrained thing in our culture. We want dates for everything. We want a plan for everything. So now, if someone grew up in a culture that's different like that, and I mean just personally, not like one country versus another,
Sure.
then they're like, it's okay, man. Just show up and it'll come into you. And those guys can still put out really good, tough competitors, really good martial artists. But what they won't have is consistency across the board of each line of increment or belt of those accomplishments. And so, you got to take it all into consideration.
I think those are some really great ideas, and you definitely left me with a lot to think about. Because once again, I coming from the aviation background where it was very regimented, it's extremely expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So every minute with an instructor or with an airplane has to be spent wisely. You cannot afford to waste them. And so sort of ingrained in my training methodology, for myself, even this podcast is an attempt to get the most out of every training minute that I get as I age. But also, as we look at this sort of COVID scenario, our training minutes are going to be reduced. So I think we have to be, at least for myself, I have to be even more refined and in touch with, optimizing those minutes. And so rather than just, kind of frown at it and say, oh, this sucks, I would rather take what I think is the jiu-jitsu perspective and say, I'm in bottom mount. Now, what do I do to deal with this? And so I'm trying to see this as a potential learning and growing opportunity rather than, just something that sucks, because it does suck. And I'm not even trying to pretend it doesn't. But curriculum design, and I can't thank you enough for your insight, is one element that I think will help optimize training minutes.
Yeah. And, the key is you took the word right out of my phrase, is you have to be an optimizer of your time, and you have to be purposeful with your movement, and every movement has a purpose. And this is, an interesting thing is you have to purge the unnecessary movements and routines and habits out of your life constantly. And and it does suck for some people, but instead of saying, why me, why, just say what now, and go do what now, and care less and do more. And it's a difficult thing for people sometimes, because, and let me tell you, I got kids, I'm home, my kids are at school, I'm trying to work from home, I'm trying to work for my academy. And, I travel and do seminars very often, and I'm not doing that now. So everybody's thrown out of their routine. But the next question is, what now? And you can there's some good people that could come out of garage training. Let me tell you, man, they just come out of nowhere. Nobody's heard of them because they're in there grinding it out. They're putting the work in. But you can't just go in and just do something for the sake of doing it. I mean, you can, but if you have a plan, at least you have a map, you kind of know where everything is. And then you have multiple ways to go to and from things. But the one thing I will say is if you're a new black belt or an academy owner and you're like, okay, man, I just wanted to teach jujitsu for fun and pay the bills.
Mm-hmm.
What do I do? I suspect that soon you're going to want to grow your business. I hope at least enough to perpetuate itself. But don't try to find too many mentors. I think that's a big mistake a lot of people make. Find a resource pool, a network of people that are invaluable, that will share their knowledge and teach you everything. But keep the group of mentors that you listen to more smaller than the large network, because it's kind of like jujitsu with that acquisition phase where you just want to watch every video you can, every submission match, every no-gi, and all of a sudden you're overwhelmed with all this input and you have no peace of mind to point you in the direction you need to go. So get all that information, process it, and then bounce it off of your key trusted people, your small circle.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way to go. I see this all the time. And too often with businesses and outside of jujitsu, I work with a lot of businesses,
Right.
and most of the people that don't change are afraid to change and do it wrong. And so they just kind of keep the status quo. But I've never met anyone that implemented a well thought curriculum and regretted it. Not once yet. And maybe someday. But what I do have a lot of people is message me. I can't even tell you how many messages that I get on Facebook or, Messenger or Instagram, where people visit and they tell me, or they don't want their coach to know at the same time, which I wish they would tell them. But how do you guys teach kids? How do you teach adults? Do you have a curriculum? And I have these conversations all the time. I recommend 100% from me to you, wholeheartedly, from the bottom of my heart. If you can get a curriculum that's well thought out, it's going to make a difference. And if you need some help, find someone that can help. It doesn't have to be me or you, but get something and ask why people are teaching a certain thing. Like, for example, I wouldn't teach a kid for the first year what a lasso guard is or an omoplata, right? How about you just get good at a takedown, hold them down, have one escape from every position, and know how to get out of the things that most of the kids in the schoolyard will put you in. I think that's a good idea. If you think differently, that's okay. But, we have to teach them the movements that will last forever, not just the fantastical attribute-based ones.
Man, I'd love to see like a 6-year-old hit bump somebody out of the mount directly to a heel hook.
Oh, man. I mean, there are some little phenoms out there, man.
If I saw that on a playground, I would I would cheer.
I'd wave down the ice cream truck and be like, "Come here, man."
Exactly. I'm not saying that should be in your kid's curriculum, but if it's not, I'm not gonna put my kid at your school.
Yeah. It's funny, man. It's interesting too to listen to the parents and the coaches too. Like, I mean, I want everyone to win tournaments as much as they can. Believe me, I want them to experience that. What I really want, though, is for them to change their life and never get picked on at work or outside at school.
Yeah.
But those are my basic ideas on curriculum development. And then we have to understand that classroom management is different than curriculum development.
Yeah, I think I was conflating the two just because when I look at directly at needs, then for me, I just go direct to how can I solve individual problems. And you've kind of, to use a term that I learned on this podcast, elucidated to me that that direct problem solving, that's more classroom management, but a curriculum is a more global strategy of accomplishing, creating a martial artist.
Yeah. So the curriculum is the template, right? And the classroom management is how you fill that in and what you fill it in with. And you can do a needs assessment, which is important in any aspect, business, personal lives, your own physical performance. But when's the last time you wrote down a chart, right? And you said, okay, what do I know from each position? You're going to find a glaring shortcoming that you are unaware of when you do that. How many, because the number one question I get every time, how do I get out of cross-side? It's probably the number one question everybody gets in a seminar. What position has the lowest submission percentage?
All you got to say is don't get there.
Yeah, don't get, yeah. So,
that'll be $75.
that's, yeah, roll, so, but, I look up to a lot of people in jiu-jitsu from all different associations and, I guess, avenues and perspectives of jiu-jitsu. But when you boil all the knowledge down and you boil down all of the things that people do, they tend to have the same roots, and they tend to boil down to the same key elements. And I think that's what it is. And to me, I think everybody should know what's expected of them, and whether you have a curriculum or not. But if someone says, what do I need to do? You should have a specific answer as a coach. What I don't like is someone says, hey coach, can you tell me what I need to work on? Don't ask. No, you're supposed to ask. That's your job. You're a coach, you're a teacher, and you're supposed to coach people and teach them so they can achieve their goals. I don't like the whole idea of asking questions is taboo, or only certain types of questions. Now, if you ask a question with some level of entitlement, well, then I'm going to, hey, listen, I don't like the way you asked. Or you could say, you should have probably asked that a different way, and confirm that's what they meant,
There's a difference between saying, what do I need to show you in order to be a purple belt?
Right.
Versus, why am I not a purple belt?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. So
similar question, but the way it was asked is very different. One says, I'm a purple belt and you just haven't awarded it to me. The other says, what am I not getting here?
Yeah. And, to anyone that's watching this, your belt is not your problem. It is not your burden. It is your instructors, and they will give it to you when the time is right. And if they say you need to work on something, you need to work on something, and you got to be coachable and mentally flexible. And you dealing with the frustrations of that is part of the process, because the more you deal with that, when you stop caring is usually when you make the progress, in my experience. I've been a purple belt. I was like for 5 years, a brown belt for 4 or 5. It's okay. It's not a big deal.
Your black belt isn't less black because of those time periods.
Yeah. And you're going to have a black belt forever. Don't be in a rush to get through the other ones, so.
Well, as we start to wrap up, one of the things that you said really stuck out to me is that no one who has adopted a curriculum that you've heard of has ever regretted it. Mm-hmm. One of the elements of this show is that I don't think my opinion matters that much. Like, I'm exploring and trying to learn from experts, and I put you in that category. You can be humble all you like. It's fine. But I look up to you, and I've learned a lot from you. I will speak out and say that from my experience in aviation, I can say that curriculums optimize. And in a situation where you can't afford to spend a lot of time on anything, you have to spend the minimum time. The curriculum is integral in creating that. Mm-hmm. So the question that someone might have of how do I get better at jiu-jitsu faster? Once again, I know I'm just a purple belt, but I do have education experience, from past experience. A big component of getting better at anything faster is buying into and being a part of a valid curriculum and working hard and having good instruction that builds through it. It's just is. I don't have a whole lot of studies, like we're all arguing over, do masks work? Do they not? And which study says they do it? I don't care. Curriculums work. So just, that's my take on that.
They work, and every instructor should know the why behind what they teach you. And, that the proverb, ask why 5 times, and you'll either realize the truth or realize you have no idea. And you should ask why, and a teacher should know. And if they don't know, they'll learn through teaching. But if you have to choose between instructors that goes, just do it. Okay, let me explain why you do this. And when you do it, and you have an if and then process in your explanation, then you have a good instructor. You should, and let me just say this, you know, to everyone watching this, if you have an instructor that genuinely cares, that pays attention to everybody, that doesn't pick favorites and cliques, they'll show you everything they know. They don't hold back anything. They want you to train with other people, but they want you to come back to your place. And they're a good human being, not just a good martial artist. You are very fortunate, and you should stick with that person, because I look at a lot of things in society, and this is just kind of my opinion, but I think it's important. I don't want my kids to look up to athletes because they're good athletes. I want them to look up to athletes because they're amazing human beings who are amazing athletes, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So if I had to choose between two people, I'll almost always go with the one that has better intentions and character. Actually, I would say always, but I don't like to use, you know, absolutes.
Sure.
But, you know, I think that's what the students deserve. And if you're a black belt, in my opinion, you are obligated to provide a healthy learning environment that has a good culture, that treats everyone fairly, under the same standards, the same expectations, and that you have to communicate them. And when you do that, and everybody is happy and greeted in a positive way as soon as they walk in the door, your business is going to take off, and your academy is going to grow. And if you're small, in a small group, man, just keep at it. But if you have a small circle, you have to manage the dynamics of the circle a little bit more than a bigger group, because the group's not as deep or broad. But you can learn just as much. But, you know, at some point, you can, when this all ends, you should go out and venture out and train with other people and get their experience and get smashed by them and get your successes and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I appreciate you having me on this, man. It's always a pleasure. And, you know, I'm always glad to share some of my insights. And I wish someone explained this to me years ago too. And I've worked with some wonderful people over the years, and I have them to thank. And I appreciate you having me on here.
Well, the appreciation is mine. I can't thank you enough for being willing to share your time and your insight with me and with, you know, my old roller brothers and sisters. I think what you have to offer here is, like I said, curriculums freaking work.
Mm-hmm.
So given your experience with it and, you know, your knowledge with it, I wanted to get your perspectives on it, because it's something that, you know, looking forward, this may be a 5-year down the line for me. You know, I may want to
Mm-hmm.
teach classes, and so I need to have an idea of what my opinions, you know, are, you know, should be. And just like you said, that small group of mentors, large group of influences, um, and also, I know this is kind of almost goes against that optimization, but what you said about, if you have an instructor that really cares and really, you know, puts the effort into creating a good environment, that's a thing of value. I can say this as my personal experience. When I first started training with Michael, he was new to instructing, and because of that, his delivery wasn't very high level. His ability was, but his ability to transfer that over, it reminded me of me teaching new pilots, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
the visual pilot stuff. So I could recognize that the skill was there. I also was, you know, not great at receiving it. So I
Mm-hmm.
had to accept that part of the problem of my slow learning in the beginning was me, but also recognizing that part of it was, you know, like I know his passing on of what he has is not as the highest level that it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so over the course of 5 years, he and I have had, you know, a conversation about how I need to get information from him.
Mm-hmm.
And I've watched him, you know, invest in his own learning, meaning his own, you know, delivery system, and become better at handing off information to the whole class. But individually, there's a relationship there, and he has a much greater knowledge of what my needs are in terms of his instruction, and is willing to adjust his instruction to those needs. And so, just like you said, sticking with someone, there's a value to sticking with someone who cares, because over time, that conversation is going to happen and your efficiencies will grow together. I'm better at receiving information from him because I've spent time figuring out how he teaches. He's better at teaching me because he spent time figuring out how I learn.
Mhm.
And so, that goes beyond curriculum and
Right.
technique choice and all that stuff. It's that, like we have a mutual respect and an understanding and a friendship and a relationship based on, the working through the challenges that he and I both faced, where he as a new instructor and me as a new student both kind of sucked at what we were doing in the beginning, you know.
Yeah.
But over time, like we've elevated both of our levels, my ability to receive, his ability to pass on, to a level where it's like reached a much greater level of efficiency and effectiveness now. And I'm really proud of that, like both for him and for me.
Yeah. That's a great story, man. And it's tough sometimes to tell your students, like, I had to drive my students 4 hours to go test when I was a purple belt and had an academy. Now they drive
Mm-hmm.
10 minutes, and the ability and the accessibility of good instructors is greater now than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you're an instructor, listen, everybody starts off the same way. You don't know how to teach. I didn't know how to teach. I mean, like everybody else, you go to jiu-jitsu, you don't know how to tie your belt. Years later, you look at the new guy and you were just like them, so we can't forget that. But when people care about their students, they always find a way. And
Mm-hmm.
if you work together, they'll do it. And there is a relationship a professional one that should be developed that doesn't cross lines. But it's when people stick it out together, man, it's great. And it's nice to see, and the team grows and everybody gets better. And as much as I teach my students jujitsu, they teach me things about life and other avenues, and they even teach you about yourself sometimes, whether it's patience or, empathy, sympathy, you name it. But none of us is above improving. And especially if we're black belts, it's our obligation to still improve every day and to be a role model, to lead a good life, and to be healthy and fit, and all those things, that whatever it means to you. But your students will emulate as much of you as they think is good. And so it's important that we fill those roles wisely.
Well, Mark, I think that's just a really awesome place for us to pause. I want you to commit to coming back. Like every time I talk to you, I have to go back through the episode and just, like scramble to write things down. You say sometimes things in passing that are just like freaking graduate level, and I'll miss it. Like it'll just be this little thing that just Mark offhandedly said, and I'm like, holy cow, that is what an insight, So I'm really, really thankful that you were willing to join us. And once again, it really does mean a lot. And I know that the information that you shared today is going to be valuable to some of the folks in situations like mine, and maybe some other academy owners that are looking at this time period and saying, what can I do to really get better so that when we come out the backside of this, we're in a new gear. And that's the goal for me. Like I look at this as, this time period sucks. What can I do to really optimize on the backside so that I'm faster at all of this and better at all this than I was going in.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, man. And I appreciate it. And I'll share this as soon as you're done with it. But I want to be on again too. So I appreciate it, and you can count on me.
That's badass. Thanks, Mark.
All right. Take care.
You as well.
Hey, old rollers. If you made it this far, I'm betting you got some great information from Coach Cukro. I know I did. So do me a favor, hit the subscribe button. If I'm getting you content that's helping you, subscribe. That helps me to get more people who will talk to us about these interesting and very important ideas about how to get better and how to stay better longer. Leave a comment. YouTube's algorithm loves comments. YouTube, that's my dog Fox growling at mean comments. Oh, he doesn't like them. I do. Fox, that's enough. If you say something mean, I'll say something nice back. I will reply to every comment, and I will do so nicely, even if you aren't. So subscribe, comment, share. It means a lot. Thanks.